this is a chance for everyone to kind of weigh in and get some more information about a proposal that has come around over a pretty condensed period of time over the last couple weeks or so, where the Arlington Montessori Action Committee has put together a suggestion to the school board regarding potentially co-locating the Montessori program at the site that was actually recommended by the superintendent for the future home of the H.B. Woodlawn program at the Wilson School on Wilson Boulevard in Roslyn. So what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce our panel. Kathleen Trainer, who is the current president of AMAC and the parent of a Drew student, is here with us. Carla Hagan, who is one of the co-founders of AMAC and the parent of 2 Drew alumni, is also with us. Eric Harold is here. Eric has been serving on the Citizen-Led Facilities Advisory Council throughout this CIP process, and will be here kind of as our resident expert in regards to matters concerning the technical aspects of the CIP. And Jerome Sims will also be joining us. He is currently the co-chair of the Superintendent's Committee to eliminate the achievement gap, and he's active within the Nauck Civic Association, which represents the area in which Drew is based. So with that said, we're going to start with Kathleen is going to provide a brief statement to provide the basic framework of what has been suggested in the proposal from AMAC. We have some questions that have come into us and that have floated around the listserv that we kind of view as pertinent to what seems to be the voices of concern within our community here. And the plan is for each of our panelists to have 1 to 2 minutes to address each of those items. And when those are completed, we will open up the floor to questions. So with that said, I'm going to pass the mic to Kathleen.
Hello, thank you all for coming out. I actually wrote out my comments to make it easier for translation, although I'm not sure we actually have any Spanish speakers here. Nonetheless, I'm going to go ahead and read them because I feel more comfortable with that, so bear with me. First, I wanted to say a few words about AMAC, Arlington Montessori Action Committee, for people that are not familiar with the organization. AMAC has a county-wide focus. So if you add up the public and private school students, Arlington has more than 1,000 Montessori children. And that's a high number, and Arlington has gained attention from various national Montessori organizations. We can be especially proud that our county has one of the oldest public Montessori programs in the world, almost 50 years old. One of AMAC's goals is to build community among our Montessori families and educators, and to make sure young families know about Montessori as an educational option. So our website, listserv, Facebook page, meetings, educational events, and fun outings help with that. Another AMAC goal is to promote high-quality Montessori. We spend a lot of time working with Arlington Public Schools. Maintaining strong public Montessori is a challenge because, as many of you know, there are a lot of bureaucratic pressures that run contrary to the Montessori philosophy. So this is why AMAC for the past 8 years has been calling for a standalone public Montessori school. The creation of a new school can be a tool in Arlington's effort to manage its increasing student population. We now see 2 opportunities for this. One is in the plan to build a new school in Roslyn at the unused Wilson site. And and the other is in the plan being explored to build a new elementary school at Thomas Jefferson. AMAC has proposed that Montessori from Drew and Montessori from Gunston become a single school and move to a new building in Roslyn in the year 2019. This primary through middle Montessori school would share the new building with another choice school, HB Woodlawn. HB Woodlawn is a 700-student 6th through 12th grade school that, like Montessori, teaches children freedom and responsibility. The two schools would be separate and independent urban neighbors. So there are many benefits to this proposal. I'm going to limit my comments to only those that affect Montessori. The first that we see is that in 2019, Arlington would finally have a single-focus public Montessori school. We're the only choice program in the county without its own school. Second, we would have a Montessori trained principal with full authority to protect the Montessori educational method, guide and support our wonderful teachers, and implement Montessori completely in all aspects of our children's day. Third, our 11-year-olds would be able to return to the upper L classes. According to Maria Montessori, 9, 10, and 11-year-olds belong in the upper L plane of development. And Drew's Montessori teachers have long lamented the artificial break that moves the children in 5th grade, after 5th grade out. And fourth and finally, students would have Montessori from the start of the school day to the end. In the hallways, for specials, at lunch, all staff members would operate under the whole school Montessori vision, just as happens in other choice schools like Immersion, ATS, Science Focus, and HB Woodlawn. So I realize that this proposal does not directly affect most of us here this evening. The new school would not be completed until 2019 at the earliest. But we who have children in Montessori today are benefiting from the work and vision of many before us. If we believe Montessori education is valuable, then it is of course appropriate that we find a way to pass on the benefit to children in the future.
Thank you, Kathleen. So with that being said, and we're going to go ahead and move into some questions. So the first question relates to kind of play and green space. I've been to Roslyn enough to know that there can't be any place for young, active kids to get out and play. There certainly isn't enough green space for our kids there either. We'll start this way and move down.
Oh, I see we're answering the question.
Yes.
Oh.
Sorry.
I can start.
Okay, go ahead.
So I will just address that question by saying there are a lot of urban places that have schools where children have fresh air and places to play. We visited a great Montessori school in DC that is part of the public school charter school system that is on an urban lot. But secondly, I would also say that when I started here as a parent at Drew in 2002, the building was new. It had just been built a couple of years prior, and while the building was being built, Wilson School functioned as the location for Drew School. So while this current building was being constructed, Drew moved as a whole to Wilson School. So Drew has already been to Wilson School before. Preschool and all ages have been there before. In fact, it functioned as a location for elementary schools to move to while they were being built. Not just Drew, but several other elementary schools also got moved there. So it has been used as an elementary school space before, as is. And that's even before the idea of a redesign by a really exciting team of architects who could really build something amazing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. This part of it is a real challenge, the green space, and I think it's going to be more and more a challenge in Arlington as a whole. This will be our first urban school. There is a park right there, Highlands Park, and I think it's entirely reasonable to imagine that APS could reserve some of that space during the day for the children to use as a playground. Also, you know, the urban designers are fabulous with ways to make use of, create green space in buildings and around buildings. If you think about the Highline in New York City. So I think that's a challenge. I think we could, if this happens, I think we could really count on the architects to come up with some cool ideas and hope that the county would also engage with the schools on some of the land around there.
Yeah, I think I want to address one other thing. The question leads one to believe that a school built at the Wilson site is not going to have any green space at all, and that's not the case. The amount of green space is a concern. It's come up at a number of the meetings. All the potential drawings show that there is green space. There will be field of play there. Some drawings actually have a field, also space up on the roof. That's a potential way to enhance and expand the green space. But the issue from APS perspective of the amount of green space is that it doesn't meet the standard that they are used to having for a middle school or for an elementary school. So I don't want folks to have the impression that this is going to be a concrete block that fills up the whole block with no grass around it. There will be fields. It's just that they'll be smaller, and that will have to be more creative in terms of how you add space to it, into how you use the urban spaces and the green spaces that are available within short walking distance of that area. And any school that goes there, whether it's Montessori with HB or a standalone other program school, is going to have that same issue as well.
Thank you, everyone. This next question is probably more for Kathy and Carla. Montessori is an expensive program to administer. Won't the cost of operating a standalone Montessori school be detrimental to the long-term viability of the program when it's no longer tied to a neighborhood school?
Okay, so that was a surprise to us, and we did a little research into this question. First of all, if Montessori was on its own, it would not be a Title I school. Montessori and the graded combined here at Drew is Title I, but if you pull Montessori out, it's very diverse economically, but it doesn't meet the threshold to be a Title I school. And there's a lot of expensive requirements for Title I schools. They have to have extra resource staffing, and they have to have low teacher-student ratios. And so Montessori would be free of those requirements. So that would lower costs. And another part of this is that we would be free also to increase our class size, which is in keeping with the Montessori ideal, because you do want to have a fairly large community of learners so that children can find work partners. And so that is something that actually would also be economical for the county. We'd also, in a standalone school, have the flexibility to reconfigure specials, and so there could be some money savings along those lines. We wouldn't have to have full-time specials at the school, specials teachers. And there's no textbook budget for Montessori. And then also, as you know, because it's so difficult to have the graded program and Montessori work in the same school, especially to manage the 3-hour work block, APS is spending $600,000 on Drew in addition just to make it happen because it's been having so much trouble. And that would be unnecessary. And so there's a savings. And then one other thing is, and this is a hiring issue, which would give a lot of ease to a Montessori principal. When you're a Title I school, you have to write a justification for every teacher that's not, quote, highly qualified. And by highly qualified, it means that they've gone to ed, they did a major in ed, in education. And Montessori teachers generally don't do education as a major in college. Usually they do a regular core subject for their BA, and then they go on to get their training as Montessori teachers, and often come out with the equivalent of a master's degree. And that's what we want. We want people that are experienced teachers. Those are the folks that we want teaching Montessori. but it's sort of outside of the mold of traditional public schools. And so these teachers also often have to take additional classes and take tests to get that, that credential as being highly qualified. And until they do that, Arlington has to write a justification for every teacher. If we weren't Title I, that would free up the hiring process, make it much easier. So that's what I would say to that. I think Carla has another point.
Yeah, just to add a sort of a data point to that, one of the things that informs us in AMAC about doing this is the relationships and conversations that we have with other people who have done this, right? We're not inventing the wheel. We're not the only school district to have public Montessori. DC has it, for example, but around the country there are many well-established public Montessori systems. And one aspect that we would need is some flexibility with the budget. If we had that flexibility with the budget, we would make it work within the normal confines of a school budget. For example, there's a school in Connecticut where a Montessori public school in Connecticut where the administrator uses the budget very creatively to have a full-time Montessori professional development on staff all the time. And he's just rearranged his budget to make this happen. So he's cut other parts of the budget to allow somebody, so they don't come in and do professional development. They have on-staff professional development all the time. And it's the flexibility that he has in his school that he can do that. Another Connecticut has a good tradition of public Montessori. There's another Connecticut administrator, Tim Nee, who we're also in touch with. And Tim, just one data point on that, Tim Nee was able to administer his public school Montessori program for cheaper than the average school in his district. So, we know that we can do this in a way, if we had the flexibility in the budget, we know that we could do this based on other school districts in a way that's not going to be more expensive.
Again, another question that's not geared towards you guys. Many of the kids in the Montessori program are young, and I'm worried that they will have difficulty moving between classrooms and specials in a vertically oriented school.
Facilities, you understand?
I thought you were asking the short guy, but I don't know. I can't say, I think that's come up a little bit in some of the conversations on the fact. I would suggest that anybody that's worried about that look at Drew. It's a vertically oriented school where children are going up and down steps all day. I haven't heard of any significant accidents or bumps or bruises coming from that. So I appreciate that there may be a concern, but again, I think with smart design, that these things can be built in, that the right safety precautions can be built in to make sure that any passage up or down or sideways is going to be safe for the students. But again, this hasn't been a big concern that's been voiced on some of the fact that I've heard. So.
I guess the only other thing I would note is if you haven't had a chance to go to the gallery walk for the architectural firm that is going to design the Wilson building, again, it's not clear at this point that Montessori would even go there, but it looks like HB is going to go there, and so they do have some designs up. They're incredible. I mean, this is a world-renowned firm, and like they have these really cool ideas for internal space and open stairways, and it's really nice. It's not if you're thinking sort of old-fashioned, public school in New York, it's not that. It's not that at all. It's very cool and forward-leaning. It's neat.
Thank you guys. Okay. Next question. I understand that if Montessori is co-located at the Wilson location, it will be right next to a high school. Is it safe to have such a wide range of children's ages so close together?
Okay. Well, again, the idea on this is that these would be two separate schools, right? So the children would not be mixing. There would be a clear barrier between one school and the other school. Instructionally, it would be the same. I mean, with the exception of the fact that the sixth graders would be back with upper L. And In general, I think Montessori and mixed age groupings, people are fairly comfortable with that in Montessori, it's part of the philosophy, and so is living in the world with the diversity that comes with family and community. So I'm not sure for Montessori families that's a huge issue, but again, the children will be in separate schools.
And I'll actually make one additional note to that. I believe the recommendation of the superintendent did actually also include a fairly large pre-K contingent program at the Wilson site. Of 150 to 200 pre-K seats, I believe was part of the proposal. That was the superintendent's recommendation. And I guess I should also make one more note. The school board will be voting on the recommendation and kind of making their final choice at their meeting on December 18th. Or at least that's what the current timeline is set up to be. So we have a couple more questions and then we'll get to you guys in the audience. So I'm new to Drew and don't understand how Drew could be improved by moving such a large segment of the student population out of the school.
I guess the best way to answer that question is.
We'll use the mic for the video.
For the camera?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that too. I think the best way to answer that question, for those of y'all who saw the test scores that we presented to the school board back in April, it showed a great derivation between what the graded program and what's going on with Montessori. And those scores existed over a 10-year period. And so, having spoken with other community leaders, even though we've got a particular plan in place now, there still isn't a great deal of confidence in APS because of its current track record of ensuring that all its kids are properly educated. So for us, as I speak with the team here, or as I have spoken with the team over the past few months, what we have in place now we look at is like the short-term plan, but the medium-term, long-term plan is really separating the two programs because it enforces APS actually put some real focus on ensuring that all the kids are educated, because what the scores showed before is that a lot of kids were being masked because so many other kids were doing well. And so now that we see what the reality is with the education here, I think it serves a double positive purpose by separating the two programs.
I guess in the scenario we're imagining, this school becomes a full neighborhood school. And so the 250 children that are in the graded program get a lot of friends and get a lot of other teachers and other people to be with in a full walkable neighborhood school. And we think that that's probably good for them. So that's how Drew could benefit also.
Yeah, and the other part to that as well is something we discovered a few weeks ago, maybe a couple weeks ago. Is that so? If you go on APS website, Hoffman Boston is listed as the actual neighborhood school for this community. Even though if you were to ask anyone in this community what their neighborhood school is, they would say it's Drew. And so over the years, as you all know, especially if you have more than one child at this school, Montessori's numbers have increased over the years. And the reason why they've increased that is new people have moved into this community, as has occurred since the economic boom, or the housing boom back in 2004, 2005. All the new people coming in, and they had kids and didn't know that they could opt to go to Drew. Their kids were automatically going to Hoffman Boston, and thus Montessori was getting extra seats. So over time, if we continue down this path, there's a strong likelihood that Montessori would just naturally take over this school. No fault to the Montessori people, but more to the fact that APS has it to where they're pushing all the kids over. So that being said, by separating two programs, but Drew become, I guess, what's the question, better, more improved? Yeah, it would be improved because it actually would be the neighborhood school.
Thank you. So we have one last question, and then we'll open up to the floor. I've never heard a good reason as to why the Montessori program can't move to Hoffman, Boston, and the Arlington View students move to Drew as a neighborhood school, since those students have the choice of which school to attend. Drew would remain a walkable community school with the addition of Arlington View students. I have a hard time believing that moving kids to the Wilson building is a better option, or adding a 250-seat addition to another school. Hoffman, Boston seems to be underutilized in terms of space. The County Montessori program would stay in South Arlington, and I don't think Hoffman, Boston needs as much rehab to become an elementary school as the Wilson site does.
So I can answer that sort of just based on my experience as I was the Montessori rep on a capacity committee, so this was like a previous iteration of this sort of fire putting out phase we're in with trying to deal with capacity by putting out fires. There was an elementary capacity committee about 8 years ago, and I was the Montessori rep on that committee, and talk about what to do about Hoffman Boston was definitely there. Because it was an underutilized facility. But since then, Hoffman Boston has been reimagined as a STEM school. So there was a new principal hired to enact the STEM focus, and sort of, I think we're at a place where that vision is being carried out, not at a place where that school is going to be revisited in terms of what it's going to be.
Turin agrees with that answer. So those are the kind of what we had filtered down as some of the more frequently asked questions that had come up in prior discussions. Again, this hasn't been discussed at such lengths because, quite frankly, I don't think this even existed as a real option until about maybe 3 weeks ago. So if you haven't heard a lot of these details yet, it's not because you haven't been paying attention. It's just that the school board, I believe, only recently even had put Wilson back as a real viable option again. So with that said, I would ask if you have a question to raise your hand. I will paraphrase questions into the mic once we get them from the crowd. If this program at Wilson were to happen, would the primary classrooms that, as they're currently distributed between Drew and the 12 or so neighborhood schools that have primary classrooms, would that model stay the same, or would all the classes move to Wilson?
There are 12 classes, not 12 elementary schools, but a total of 12 neighborhood classes, and in the scenario that we imagined, they would stay in place. The 7 primary classes at Drew would go with the elementary classes and with the 3 middle school classes from Gunston. So that's how we're imagining a Montessori school, and that's about 450 kids, and it would have probably space to grow to about 600. The diversity part of this, still, we have that 2/3, 1/3, and that stays the same across the board for the entry point at primary. So I think that helps with diversity. And again, it's still a countywide program. So Drew, wherever this school would be, that would still be a countywide program. And then you would also still have your neighborhood programs that would, if parents wanted their children to continue, then they could, sort of move into the elementary portion of it. So it's no different, except for the program moves to a different building.
Just to add 2 points to that. Number one, whatever the new Drew as imagined by the community could also have new Montessori primary classes as part of the new Drew. That's possible. That's the community, that's a conversation that the neighborhood, that the stakeholders need to have in a new Drew. But also, number 2, I just want to mention that at some point, sort of in these 8 years since the last capacity committee I sat on, where these discussions are happening about how to address us. We were growing at an elementary school a year, now we're growing at a middle school a year. At some point, discussions came about a preschool center. But that didn't really get anywhere. We had a commitment really from so that would be sort of putting all the preschoolers into one place. But what I saw is from our staff a commitment that preschool be throughout Arlington, because that lowers barriers to accessibility. It bonds kids to their neighborhood school early. You know, there's a benefit to having preschool APS senior staff saw in neighborhood schools. That may be revisited, I don't know, in this new capacity crisis, but I haven't heard, as far as I know, that's still the prevailing philosophy. It may not be that way forever, I don't know, but as far as I know, it's the way it is now.
I had two comments from things that were said in my question. So one of the comments in terms of the facilities and the stairs, the fact that it would be a vertical building in the Wilson space. You may not hear any complaints, but I do know for the little ones, going up and down the stairs, they can do it. I mean, it's good for them in terms of their gross motor skills and all that, but it takes time. So it's like they have to leave earlier to get to the buses anytime they're doing, of course, fire drills and things like that. But it is a challenge. So if the kids are going down, up or down multiple sets of stairs, I mean, I'm all for it. They should be out there and doing the stairs and learning the stairs. It's more time consuming. I know the teachers with the younger ones in the class, they actually, like at Drew now, like they start taking the kids down before the news is over and stuff like that, just because it takes them a long time to get down. Do you want to?
No.
Okay, I didn't know if you were moving through your mic. I had another comment.
Just real quick, the idea that we're seeing here is that those 7 primary classes would be on the ground floor, along with the Stratford program. Yeah.
That's the APS standard. APS is not going to move up on the 6th floor. I'm sorry. The APS standard would not put elementary school students up on 5th and 6th floor. They're going to be on the 1st floor, probably first or primary. Sorry, yes, you're right. Primary students, they're going to be on the 1st or 2nd floors, like they are here.
Thank you. And then another comment, just in terms of the mixed ages, and it didn't come out in the question, but from what I heard, some folks, for example, are concerned that the little kids are going to be on the buses with the big kids, for example. And bus riding with 6th graders or 7th or 8th graders is different than bus riding with a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old. Again, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be mixed, but I think that that may be part of the concern. And I don't know if the schools would be envisioned on the same schedule in terms of times, if they would be riding the same buses. But I just share that as food for thought because that may be factoring into people's concern.
Did you want to repeat what you said?
So the concern was whether or not the mixed age in terms of transportation or the countywide busing program would be an issue if you had 3 and 4-year-olds sharing buses with 7th graders, 8th graders, juniors, seniors in high school. So I don't know if anyone wanted to comment on that.
I think we're not there yet. I mean, right now 3-year-olds share with 5th graders, right? You know, so there's still a huge age span in our Montessori buses currently, and there are bus aids, to strap the children in. But I think this is a conversation for APS and APS transportation to work out. Not the parents. But that's a good
I'm just
point.
sharing is that feeding in. I think I've heard that as a concern for.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just say right now there are 2 separate bus, set of bus routes to get kids from around the county to HP Woodlawn and to get kids from around the county to Drew. And so maybe there still could be 2 separate bus routes to get kids to the same site. I don't know. These kinds of things we'll have to talk about. I would like our middle schoolers, as I have my middle schooler here, to ride the buses with 3-year-olds, by the way. I think that would be a good thing for both groups. My own personal opinion.
And I'll just throw in my own personal opinion too. I think a lot of times when we have this discussion, we automatically jump to the worst case scenario. And I think in a lot of cases, we forget about the real opportunity that's there. I've watched my kids get some really great treatment from older kids on the bus that they ride. And I think there's some real relationship and bonding that really happens amongst people of different age groups. I think there's some real compassion and empathy skills that are had a chance to grow there. So Diane, does that wrap up what you wanted to
I
say?
had a question.
Okay.
I want to share the floor.
Okay, so we'll move on.
Oh, it's related to that, and this dates me, but I went to HB Woodlawn, that time, we rode the bus with ATS kids. So we all were on the same route, because ATS then was at what is now Science Focus. So we all rode the bus together, and it was fine.
So the statement was that at one point, in the probably not too distant past, HB Woodlawn students shared buses with students at Arlington Traditional, which would have been a similar age gap to what would be proposed in a co-located campus with Montessori and HB, where the countywide busing was combined potentially. Diane, or did anyone else?
Well, I just had a question then about what the vision is for what was referred to, the new Drew without Montessori, in terms of what are the thoughts about where the boundaries would be? Would families be asked to come back from Hoffman Boston to sort of reintegrate into Drew? Has that been thought about? I'm certainly continuing to serve.
Yeah, I mean, we've had those conversations for a bit
Can
now.
you repeat the question, Ron?
Oh, the question, the vision for the new Drew. Sorry. So yeah, we've been having those conversations for the past few months now. I mean, simply put, some Oakridge of Abington was feet in the air, maybe Randolph, depending upon the effects of the addition and how they decide to draw those new boundaries. The Hoffman-Boston issue obviously would have to be discussed, because I would think that, I like to apply common sense, but we're dealing with government entities. I would like to think that the community kids who live in Nauck who are going off in Boston would automatically come over here. And I think by redrawing the boundaries in that manner, then you would automatically fill up the seats and thus relieve Abingdon and Oakridge and again possibly Randolph from their overspillage. But then with Hoffman-Boston, then you have to get creative with filling up those seats, but that's another issue. With respect to programming, again, talk around everyone as like a community school, how that's defined is yet to be determined. Our main focus right now is ensuring that some action occurs with respect to moving Montessori out of Drew. Once that occurs, then we can, move down in a more formal process of determining what we would do with this list.
So the question is, if the status quo remains and APS chooses to keep the Montessori program at Drew, would they consider expanding the Montessori program at Drew and potentially phasing out the traditional side, or giving the opportunity to traditional students to move into the Montessori program?
I'm going to let the lady at the end handle the Montessori piece. So, with respect to the status quo, the talk that everyone is having, and the reason why the new administration at the school is structured in the manner in which it is because it's pretty much APS's last resort until whichever that you use. Preposition, sorry. We would move to what we're attempting to do now. Right? Because right now, the community leaders are not paying attention to what's going on, as is the school board in this case. Because if best case scenarios, right, the graded program scores improve drastically, right? And they at least meet the APS average or better, okay? So best case scenario, that happens. And then there'd be no excuse in the next 5 to 10 years to separate the two programs. Okay, it is what it is. The problem with that is that APS has shown over the past 10 years that they don't have a fix or don't know what the fix is for that aspect of the programming here in the school, which is why I've been working with them, AMAC and other people, to figure out a next plan just in case they do happen to not drastically improve the education and scores for the children in the grade program. I'm trying to see how else to answer this question. That's
I'll jump in a little bit just from the CIP process angle. There's still quite a few decisions to be made. It's unclear yet what's going to happen at the TJ site and what that's going to play out to be, and if they decide to build there, if it's going to be a choice program where they move one of the South Arlington choice programs or not, if they decide to make it a neighborhood school that opens up Henry. There's lots of other options, so I think I don't necessarily think, and maybe I'll get smacked in the head if I say this, but I don't think this is our last opportunity. It certainly is one of our best shots, but I think there are other opportunities in the future, at least from the aspect of moving Montessori out and creating a standalone Montessori.
I'll also take a stab at this question, maybe Carla can back me up. I guess there's two things. One is the fact that the neighborhood probably wants its neighborhood school back. You know, there's history of this area that the children were bussed out of here during integration, and then this became a countywide model school and a choice school. People were bussed in here from all over the county. So the neighborhood hasn't had a full neighborhood school for a really long time. The second part of that, from the Montessori perspective, we've talked with people who are experts on Montessori, the National Center for Montessori in the public sector, and there are absolutely no examples of neighborhood Montessori schools. And the reason is that Montessori starts at age 3, and you can't, insist that people in a neighborhood send their kids to school at age 3, even with a sliding scale. You can't do that. And then the other thing that makes it very difficult to have a neighborhood Montessori school, and we're talking high quality here, we're talking about real Montessori, is that if you're a neighborhood school, you have to be able to accept children in at all ages when people move into the neighborhood. And it's very, very hard for a lot of kids to come in at 3rd or 4th grade with no Montessori experience, and that's their neighborhood school, and they're expected to come into a culture that is really foreign. And it's also very hard for the teachers and the existing community to absorb children as they come in continually from a neighborhood. So it just doesn't work. It's not really fair to the neighborhood to make that a school, and it's not really fair to the school itself to try it, which is trying to maintain high quality Montessori. So it's sort of it's not a good fit. It's a much better fit as a choice program. Where children can come in at 3, or they can come in from with other Montessori experience. Neighborhood schools, function better when they're using more of a traditional model.
So the question related to if the situation co-located with HB Woodlawn at Wilson would not happen, and would the Thomas Jefferson newly proposed elementary school be a potential option, and if that would become a home for Montessori, would that then allow for additional synergies with the existing middle school at Thomas Jefferson, as far as sharing middle school classes and potential sports teams, similar to the way that Montessori students are integrated at Gunston?
Yeah, I mean, each site has its own benefits and its own, challenges. But definitely for the TJ site, one of the benefits is it's the proximity to TJ. So right now at Gunston, the kids take their core classes in a Montessori block, and they've been able to block out times for that so that there can be kind of a work period. But then they go out for specials and for non-core classes. And it works fantastic at Gunston. There's a super supportive principal at Gunston who helps make it happen. So having it near TJ, that's definitely one of the benefits, is the accessibility to that kind of thing. And as you said, after-school activities as well.
So the question is related to the benefits that could come as part of having a K or pre-K through 8 single facility Montessori program, and what might be required in terms of essentially APS via recommendation of the superintendent to essentially provide a waiver to allow that to happen, and whether or not the superintendent may or may not be supportive of that sort of action.
It's a good question.
Yeah, well, so I think that the principal has the authority to use his or her budget for specials, however she chooses. I mean, I think that that's what a principal does. Principal is sort of the manager and operator, managing operator, whatever they're called, the CEO of the school. It is a little different to put 6th grade back in the upper L plan of development, and that probably is an instructional discussion that senior staff would have. And also I'll mention that that is a current discussion, because with the overcrowding, especially in North Arlington, they're talking about establishing 6th grade academies, right? So that's sort of basically pulling them out of the middle school. You have another quick?
Yeah, in fact, that's how Montessori Middle School started.
Oh,
It started by leaving the 6th graders here at Drew for 1 year, and then moving them over to repeat that.
So yeah, we did have the flexibility, for example, to have 6th graders here for 1 year when the Montessori program was launched. Arlington is a school district where the principals have a lot of control over their schools, which I think is a wonderful thing. Like HB Woodlawn doesn't do a lot of things the way that other schools do it, and certainly our pre-K through 8 school would be a school that doesn't do it the way that a lot of schools would do it, but I don't see any barriers to that. And I do think our superintendent, I do think our superintendent is flexible thinking that way. He came into a system that sort of already has that in place, I think. Yeah, and the follow-up question is, in terms of needing 90 minutes for this kind of special and 45 minutes for that kind of special, about sort of how can you, if you had a studio model, for example, where the kids would go to art in an art studio instead of everybody in the class goes to art for a certain period of time, kids would have sort of some freedom to go there in a studio way. Could you do it? And I think, again, we're not inventing the wheel on this. This is done at other public school systems. So luckily we have a lot of great models to draw from on how they do it. And they all have demands that come down from the state and from the federal government to implement. And they do it successfully. It's done right across the river in Washington, D.C.
So just in terms of interest in this, if you have interest in it, or if you don't even. This is a live issue, and the school board is discussing it, and there will be a vote on December 18th about what to do with HB Woodlawn. And so if you support this, a letter to the school board, or even speaking at a school board meeting, which is a very simple thing to do, it's 2 minutes. You can just write it down and you sign up online and speak for 2 minutes. You can do that, and they take note of that. We're actually one of the most silent communities in the county. We really are. If you look what's been going on with North Arlington Middle School capacity and South Arlington Elementary School capacity, we are really silent compared to most of the other communities. So, please share with your friends if you see use with this proposal, if you agree with it, and speak out. And I guess the main thrust on this is I think the community, the Nauck community, and the Montessori community sees benefit in separating the programs. And where we see the opportunity to do that, that's what we're trying to seize. And that not many opportunities come up in the CIP process, where they're actually building new capacity. It's a golden moment, right? So that's why we're trying to take advantage of that.
I just wanted to say the last time before they built this Williamsburg school, the one that they're building now, the last time that was APS built a school was when they built, when they created Claremont, which was the immersion school, which allowed Spanish immersion to move out of Abingdon and Oakridge. So I don't know if you want to share that, but just historically.
Yeah, so I think one point related to the previous CIP, a lot of folks may not be aware that the immersion program at Claremont was at one time cohabitated in a neighborhood school, much in the way the Montessori program is. And I'm not sure what the limitations were on the program, but I would assume that there would have had to have been some, particularly in regards to specials, much in the way we deal with here at Drew. And I think anyone who's aware of the Claremont program understands how that program has kind of exploded in its popularity and its performance since becoming a standalone choice school. And I will say just one more thing. I believe the school board has a public comment session that is coming up, I believe, on December 3rd. We'll confirm that date via the listserv at a later date. But if you are interested in this topic, please go and consider whether you go meet with the school board member during office hours or at that public comment forum. I had never been to a school board meeting until last year, and it's a pretty amazing thing to see. Particularly, I think Kathleen makes a really good point. Every school board meeting I've ever been to has anywhere from 3 to 20 parents of North Arlington schools that don't currently have FLES and have early release that get up and speak and plead with the board to have that program implemented and early release eliminated. And that's not to begrudge their desires for that, because they certainly have a point. But there are other schools that are really well organized and very loudly supported in front of the county board, or the school board. And I know that that has an impact, as now we're to only 4 schools in the county that don't have the FLES program. So, you know, our voices need to be heard, or the school board will continue to move on without us. Jerome, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Okay, well, I would like to thank everyone for coming out. I'd particularly like to thank our panelists for sharing their time and their expertise on this matter. Our next general meeting will be on December 2nd, I believe. Yeah, thank you for confirming that. My brain's a little bit of a mush pile right now. So we may have some additional information regarding the goings-on with this. We'll try to at least have a brief update as to where things stand at that time. So again, thanks for coming. If you've actually sat through an hour of this on YouTube, thanks for watching. And we'll talk to everyone again soon. Bye.